award-winning stuntman Loren James is my next guest, and we've known each other for a number of years.
Yes, many years.
So I know you are pretty much of a fixture for the film festival here in Lone Pine. You've been coming from the very beginning.
From the very beginning, and when he first started it, I helped him get it going, and so they're great. It's a great thing. It's a great thing. Oh, yeah.
Wonderful. There's even a Loren James tour.
Yeah. I show my films on How the West Was Won, and then I take people in buses out, and I show them where I did everything, and talk about what's going on and what the movies are like and the whole thing, and they love it.
Well, of course.
Yeah.
Now, you were Steve McQueen's stunt double for years.
Yeah.
How did you meet him?
Well, they had the first episode of Wanted Dead or Alive, and they had a stuntman come in to double him, and he had a big pot on him. And Steve looked at that, and he looked way over at the director, and he says, "Fire him." So they fired him. So they hired Dick Farnsworth. And he came in, and he was a little taller, but he was good. And Steve was rolling up the back of his hat. And Farnsworth went over and says, "What are you doing?" He said, "Well, I make it look like I live." And he says, "Cowboys would never do that." So he said, "Fire him." So he called Dick. He says, "Who's a good stuntman for this guy?" And he says, "Well, Loren James, and he can be here in 20 minutes because he lives right near here." Oh, so they call me. So they put me in his wardrobe, and I walked on the set, and he was sitting down in a chair, and I walked across over to the director, and he'd hug me, and everybody hugged me and so forth because I knew everybody. And he's going, and he's just looking at me like this. So I started to go over to get some hot chocolate, and I was about 20 feet away from him, and he says, "Hey, you." And I went, "Yeah, what?" And he says, "Bring me some coffee." So I walked up, and he was sitting down. I walked up, and I says, "Are you Steve McQueen?" And he says, "Yeah." And I says, "Well, I'm here to make you look better than you can make yourself look, and don't you dare blow my close-ups." I just did it very seriously. And he looked at me like that, and I walked away, and he says, "Fire him!" And the director said, no, we're going to do the stunt in 10 minutes. You can't fire him, then you can fire him after." "Okay." And he just sat there like this. So I went and had my hot chocolate, and then I said, "Mr. McQueen," and he says, "Can I bring you some coffee?" And he goes, "Yeah." So I brought him over coffee, and we sat there about 10 minutes, and then it was time to do the stunt. So I went over to the director, and I says, "How athletic can I make this guy look?" He says, "Oh, he wants to look really athletic." Well, I was in a barn, and the window was really high, and I was supposed to dive through and land on my shoulders on the ground and roll and get up and jump on his horse and ride off. And so I said, "Okay." So they had 3 horses like this. His horse was here and 2 other horses here. So I put his horse on the other side of the other horses. And Steve's sitting there, "What's going on here?" So he got up and he stood there to watch me. So I went through the window, I did a somersault, lit on my feet. Jumped the other 2 horses, lit in the saddle, and rode off, and I was with him from then on, from the whole career, until he died of cancer, yeah.
How many projects have you worked on?
Okay, I figured out about 2 or 3 months ago, I worked on over 500 films, and I worked on 2,000 television shows. In 50 years, I quit 5 years ago, so I just turned 78, so I just did that. And I'm the only guy that went 50 years and never broke a bone. But I always kept in shape, and I went to 2 Olympics, and I really kept in shape, and that's how you do it. And I never drank, smoked, used dope, and some guys use dope, and they kill themselves, they kill other people, it's terrible. So anyway, that's how I did it.
Now, you doubled Frank Sinatra, too, didn't you?
Yeah, I doubled Frank for many, many years, and Kirk Douglas, and Charles Bronson. Frank, it was funny. I was down in Mexico working with John Wayne on a film, and it was called The Sons of Katie Elder, and the second star was Dean Martin. So we were down there, and they owned part of the Sands then. So Frank calls and says, "I'm doing a big thing Sunday night, or Friday night, I want you to come up." He says, "I'm working all day Friday, I'm working Saturday, I can't do it." "Oh," he said, "that's okay." So he came the next day, and he sent us a telegram he sent to me. He said, "I'd give Sammy's other eye to be at your opening." So So then about 2 months after that, we had a Dean call me, and he says, I want you to come up because I'm going to do a big thing at the concert, and I want you, and he called his stuntman. He said, I want the two of you to come up, and then Frank and I will all have dinner afterwards. It's okay. So we went up there, and they had guards with us the whole time, and so we walked in, and there's a table like this, I mean, where he was going to sing, and right there was a little table like this, and two chairs on either side, and way in the back we saw a room. We started to go there, and the guy says, no, no, no. And they brought us over, and they sat us in these two chairs. Everybody could see us. For an hour, he sang, and everybody loved it. It was just great and so forth. And then they had an intermission, and then he came out, and he had a drink in his hand. He went like this, and he says, you know why I do this? Everybody looks, and he says, we like it. So then he came, and he put his seat on the table and put his seat on the where he's singing, and put his feet on our table, and the next hour he told stories about the two of us. Some were lies, some were truth. It just went on, and everybody laughing, and we're sitting there, and we looked over at the guards, and they said, nope, you got to stay right there. So that's what he did for 2 hours. Then afterwards, we went to lunch, the dinner. So it was just Frank and the Dean and I and his stuntman. Finally, he was a big shot in the mafia. I don't know if you knew that. Frank was. So he looked at me and he says, anybody owe you money? And I said, no. He said, well, if they do, just let us know. We'll get it for you. I said, oh, okay. Then we were having dessert, and he says, you want anybody off? And I said, what? He says, no. He says, do you want anybody off? And I said, no. And he says, well, you let us know, and we'll take care of it for you. Nobody will know about it. I mean, that's when he likes you, he really likes you. And if he didn't like it at all. So we had a great time, and so that was big with Frank.
Who was your favorite second unit director?
Richard Talmadge. Yeah, and I met him on the first show I did up here at 56. It was a Western, and this guy was the second unit director. He started out he doubles Douglas Fairbanks. He doubled him for years. And so now he's second unit director. So he said, I want somebody to do me a good saddle fall. And I said, well, I'll do it. And he says, no. He says, I want a stuntman. I said, I am a stuntman. He looked at me. He says, you are? And he said, yeah. Oh, all right, do it, he said. So they had a pit that was about 12 feet wide and about this far down. And he says, I want you to go down this and come up the other side and get shot. So when he had the camera there, and I said, okay, and he's just sitting there like, this is going to be terrible. So the guy came, and he says, I got a low horse for it. And I said, no, give me a tall horse. You want what? I said, I want a tall horse. So he got me a tall horse. So we came, and then we jumped the whole thing, and as we lit the other side, I lit up the fire, and I got shot, and I went up, and I did a 1.5 somersault with bad form, and hit, and bam, bam, and I laid right in front of the camera. And everybody said, he broke his neck. And the director came up, and he says, no. He said, I know what you did. He says, you're a gymnast. And I said, yeah. And so I got up, and I've met him from then on. I did every show he did until he retired. And he was 93 when he retired. And I did every show that Henry Hathaway did, and he was 93 when he retired. That's how I met them.
So I know that we have very well-informed audiences at Lone Pine, but explain what a second unit director does.
Second unit director, I did a lot of that for one time, is when you're doing action, the second unit director directs all the action and does everything. And so I did a lot of that for a long time, and then I coordinated shows. I'd hire the other guys and tell them what to do and how to do it. But the second unit director is a guy that really knows how to do stunts and how to do it, and knows how to roar the cameras and have all that stuff and do it right. So the guy has to really know action. He has to know cameras. He has to know everything. And when I first started, I did stunts, and then I started coordinating, and I'd hire all the stuntmen to do that, and then I started doing second units. So I did a little bit of that, and then I quit after 50 years. But anyway, but the guy has to know everything. And he has to know the special effects, he has to know cameras, he has to know everything to tell them where to do it and how to close to do it, and they do it on the wheels and the things going and all of that. So the guy has to know what he's doing, and he has to know everything to get it right and get it right, and that's what a second unit director does.
With all the projects that you worked on, what was your favorite? Or did you even have a favorite?
Well, I doubled Steve McQueen for his whole career, and Nevada Smith was great, and The Sand Pebbles was great, and How the West Was Won were my three favorite films. And on How the West Was Won, there was 5 episodes. I worked on 3. I did 80% of the stunts on 3 of those 5 episodes. And then doubled Steve for those 3 things, and it was just fantastic. I doubled him for everything, but that was a great thing, yeah.
Okay. I'd like to have some questions from you. Yes, sir.
You said you were in the Olympics. What genre did you do there?
Oh, I did the modern pentathlon. I was the first civilian in history to do it. It's always military. And I was on the water polo team at the time that went over and took 3rd in the Olympics. And I kept getting cramps in my legs. And the guy says, "What are you doing?" And another guy says, "Well, he rides horses all the time. He does this and he does that." And he says, No, you got to just swim." I said, "Well, it's too bad there isn't some stunts in the Olympics where you have to do a lot of stuff." And he says, "Well, there is one. He calls it the modern pentathlon." So I called the guy that was in charge of it, and I said, "Can anybody do this?" And he said, "No, it's always military." But he says, in the Olympics, the Olympic funds do it, so a civilian can do it, but nobody's ever done it. So he says, "Well," and I said, "Well, I'd like to do it." And he says, "Well, you have to send me that you are a world record in 4 of the 5 events." So I sent him everything I've ever done. So he called me, he says, "You can come down." Well, I trained 5 weeks. And the guys that I competed against were in the Army, and they trained 11 months, 12 months a year. That's all they did. And a lot of guys have been there for 4 years doing it. And they have competitions all the time for the military. So I trained 5 weeks, and I went down. I placed 7th, and they went, "Oh, my God." They couldn't believe a stuntman could do it. Then the second time I did it was 64, and I trained 5 weeks. The next time I trained 10 weeks, and I was 36 then, and I took 4th, and I almost made it, and they just couldn't believe it, that a civilian could do this against the Army. But there was Marines, and everything else was there, and so that's what it was. So it was riding, fencing, shooting, swimming, and running. So.
Yes, sir.
Loren, what was your first opportunity as a stuntman?
Well, I was teaching calculus and trigonometry in school, and I was studying to be an opera singer because my mother was an opera singer and my sister was an opera singer. MGM was looking for 3 guys to do an 80-foot dive off a cliff at Catalina, and the guys that could dive that high weren't available. And the guy came home and he was telling his wife that, and the guy that was in my calculus class, he says, "Well, my teacher's a diver," because we had a pool and I put in some diving stuff and put some money to put things on the band uniforms. So, well, that's good. He says. So they called me the next day and they said, "Can you come down after work and interview us?" And I said, "Well, yeah." So I went down and they hired me. They needed me for a week. And I had a week, and I said, "Yeah." So I went back to the principal and I said, "They want me for a full week." He says, "Well," he says, do it. That's good to have a teacher working. Go do it." So I went over and did the dive. I went up, and I look at this 80-foot cliff, and I looked down. I says, "What's it like down there?" "Oh, it's good deep." And I says, "No, I'm going to judge it first." And he says, "No, you." I said, "We're ready to do it." I says, "I'm going to go down and do it first. I'm not going to dive without looking." So they took me down. They got me on a boat, and they took me around where we were going to dive. 4 feet under, a flab went out 60 feet, 4 feet deep. I would have killed myself. So I told him, I said, "Oh." So I picked out another spot, which was 90 feet. So we did the dive, and the other 2 guys, one guy has never done a dive in his life, and he went and he lit on his belly, and he was knocked out. The next guy, he went down and did a swan dive, and he lit on his belly. And they were both out, so I held their heads up until the thing came to take us away. So that worked out fine, and so I went back to the teaching school again, and about a month later, they called me to do something in some gymnastics in a film. So I did that. And in 6 months, I worked on 6 films, and the principal said, "Hey, no more time off. You either teach school or do that." And I said, "I'll see you later." And that was 50 years ago.
As a second unit director, did you have a hard time finding good stuntmen yourself?
Oh, no, I knew all the stuntmen. So, yeah, I formed the Stuntmen's Association. And it was the first time we've had that. I worked with on a movie a long time ago, and they had 10 guys, 10 Marines and 10 Navy guys fighting. We went 3 days and couldn't get the fight. And so Mickey Rooney was on the show, and he came over and says, "What's going on here?" I said, "Well, I'm a stunt man. The other guy on the other thing is a stunt man, and the rest are extras." "Extras?" I said, "They don't know how to fight." And he says, "Oh." He says, "Get 10 guys and come here to do it." Okay. So I got 10 stuntmen on both sides. We did it 1 hour and a half hour. So I said, we've got to have a thing where all the stuntmen are in one group so they knew who the stuntmen are and who aren't. So I formed the Stuntmen's Association, and next year we'll be 50 years old. And so we did that, and so then when they wanted a stuntman, they know where to go get stuntmen, and that's how we did that. So.
Was the information available at that time as far as, say, diet and exercise and all that, things to keep you healthy and in good shape?
Well, I started diving and swimming when I was 7 years old. And then I did gymnastics in high school and college. And so I knew how to keep in shape and do that. And then when I was working, I'd run 10 miles every day. And wherever, if you're in Hong Kong or everywhere, I'd always run 10 miles every day. And I kept in shape and you know, always kept in good shape all the time. And I swam all the time and did all that and skied. And I loved skiing at Mammoth all the time. And so that's how I always kept in shape. And because I kept in shape and I didn't do drugs, smoked, and that's why I never got hurt for 50 years.
Yes, sir.
Staying in shape, would you say that was common for stunt people?
Yeah, there's a lot of, I think in the 50 years I was in, there's 8 people killed doing stunts. Some, it just something happened. Others, they weren't in shape and they didn't know what they were doing. I always felt, when I first got in the business, I found out that 80% of all the stuntmen were ex-Marines. 90% were college educated and some have master's degrees. And they were all Olympic or national champion athletes in 2 or 3 events. So they had the thing up here and they knew what they were doing, and that's how they never got hurt. But things happened, but I just always kept in shape, and I always, before I did it, I looked at it first and thought what was going to happen and did it and think about it. And then when I do a stunt, I do it wild and reckless, but when I did it wild and reckless, but beforehand I thought about it first and did everything, and that's how I did it. So
yeah.
That's
lots of planning.
Yes.
Goes in to those stunts. Yes, sir.
On the movie The Sand Pebbles, can you tell us about a little bit about your interaction with the cast and maybe some of the things that you actually did on that movie?
Yeah, you remember in the end when they came and they hit they had the barricade there and they had that big fight. I directed all that. And then I doubled Steve, and then I had a part on the film. And I knew all the cast real well, and they were just fantastic people. We really had a great time. One thing that Steve and I both liked was peanut butter sandwich with bananas on it. And they had lots of bananas there, but no things, so I had a great big thing of peanut butter sent over from my father, took me over. And we did that, so he and I had peanut butter and jam sandwiches every day.
Where was it filmed?
Well, we filmed it, we were 11 months in Taiwan and Hong Kong and China. In fact, we were in China on a big boat. And on it they had this machine gun that had blanks in it. Pretty soon 2 Chinese planes came over real low and just went thing. So they went around, they came in again. So Steve got up and started machine gunning them, and they disappeared. Pretty soon 5 planes came and they were going to bomb us. And at that time, from the Hong Kong, 8 planes came from the English, and they chased them away. But they were going to bomb us, and he was shooting blanks, and they didn't know it. So, and Steve went, "Oh my gosh!" That was the end of that.
That boat that they used for that movie, was that like a real boat?
No, they made it like the boats at that area, and they made it all the way from there. And they had a Chinese guy running it with his crew, and it was just like the ones they had in that days, exactly.
You know, I hate to do this, but we're out of time.
Oh.
It went so quick.
Oh.
Thank you so much,
okay.
Loren.
Thank
it
you.
was great. And thank you. You had great questions.